So we turned down the $1 million from Microsoft and instead suggested that they pay us a royalty per copy. I actually ended up in a conversation where I got compared to Opie and Andy because you Southerners ain't very bright. If you'll turn down $1 million, by the end, they were shipping about 400,000 copies of Excel a month. So every month, a check showed up from Microsoft for $400,000.
Welcome to Triangle Tweener Talks, a weekly podcast by builders for builders where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between with an exclusive focus on founders from the Triangle region of North Carolina. Tweener Talks is produced by Earfluence. Now here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the Triangle Tweener Fund, Scot Wingo.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Triangle Tweener Talks. I was really excited to sit down with Richard Holcomb, general partner at North Carolina Venture Capital Fund and deal lead at Quorum Group. Before I give you a summary of what we talked about, I'd like to thank our sponsors. EisnerAmper, formerly HPG, one of the world's largest business consulting firms with a dedicated technology practice offering outsourcing, accounting, tax, and advisory services. Our experienced professionals serve more than 2,000 technology companies from early stage startups to public enterprises. If you want to learn more, go to eisneramper.com/tech, T-E-C-H. Smashing Boxes, a Durham-based design-centric digital transformation company. Bank of America, their transformative technology group, helps game-changing tech businesses and founders realize their boldest ambitions across a wide range of technology sectors. Robbins & Bradshaw, a full-service business law firm with a passion for supporting the Triangle's entrepreneurial ecosystem. And special thanks to our friends at Earfluence, who helped produce this podcast. I first met Richard Holcomb right around 1997. I was a first-time entrepreneur, started my company Stingray Software. And to be honest, I was really struggling as a tech founder to understand a lot of this business stuff. One of my NC State professors, Dr. Tom Miller, who we are going to have on the pod soon, connected me to Richard. Richard was already on his third company, HAHT, H-A-H-T Software, and they had raised a ton of capital. They were growing rapidly, and yet he still took time to mentor me and help me through what I was working on. So much time that I began to feel guilty and tried to compensate him with either some cash compensation or stock. Richard refused and taught me a very valuable lesson: the importance of giving back, of helping people up the ladder behind you versus pulling up the ladder behind you. And the fact that entrepreneurship is not a zero-sum game. It's a pie, our little triangle startup pie, and we can work together to make that pie bigger instead of fighting over slices. And that makes a lot more sense if you really think about it. The pie is growing so fast here in the triangle that everyone's slice just gets bigger, and thus it's a win-win, not a zero-sum game. There's a abundance kind of a situation. So Richard taught me a relatively young founder that lesson, and that is the kernel of why this podcast exists, the Tweener List, the Tweener Fund, and all things Tweener. So this is all part of my paying it forward, thanks to Richard setting a great example for me. So it was a really full circle moment when I sat down with Richard for the pod. And despite spending a ton of time with him since 1997, and I've heard a lot of his stories, but I've never heard the whole story linearly. And I was able to pick out some fun new nuggets, and I think you'll enjoy it. Here's a couple of highlights to listen for. Richard started with humble beginnings. So he grew up on a farm in rural Whiteville, North Carolina. Now he's going to get back to the farm in the story, which is pretty interesting. He taught me a skill I use a lot, especially when dealing with some of our friends out in Silicon Valley, and I call it Hillbilly Negotiating, and you'll learn about that in this episode. He did this deal with Microsoft that is still legendary to this day at Microsoft for a deal not to do with an outside vendor. And it is still used as a case study for product managers and the legal team on deals you should not ever do. So in this conversation, we cover everything from his early days working with Oracle and the rise of database middleware to founding game-changing companies like DataDirect and StrikeIron, to lessons learned navigating the dot-com bubble. So if you've ever kind of wondered how someone can navigate through that, how do you go from the farm, very humble beginnings, to pretty wild success, you're going to enjoy this conversation with Richard Holcomb, as I did.
I was born in England. My father was a GI and my mother was an English lass. And they actually got together before my mother was 21, which was legal age in England. So I was born out of wedlock.
Whoa,
And
controversial.
my grandmother had my father kicked out of the country.
Wow.
So my mother and I immigrated to England when she turned 21. I was 3.
Interesting. And then where'd you all land?
Whiteville, North Carolina.
Why on earth Whiteville, North Carolina?
That's where Daddy was from.
Okay.
He had a farm there and grew up on the farm, and then he did some construction work, and it was sort of a rural Southern life, and it was drilled into my head that you need to go to college.
Yeah. Did you work on, what kind of farm was this? Was this like a dairy farm or like tobacco?
Well, farms in that time did a little bit of everything, but they only made money in tobacco.
Yeah.
So tobacco
Okay.
farm.
Yeah. Did you actually get out there and do
every morning.
tobacco stuff and whatnot?
About 5 o'clock, by the time I was 5, I was driving the tractor.
Yeah.
And my first job was to fuel it up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm a 5-year-old putting fuel in the tractor at 5 in the morning and then driving around and doing the tobacco.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know where your chicken sandwich comes from. I've had the pleasure of watching you deal with a chicken, and you did it very fast and easy. I was like, this is not Richard's first time working with
I
chickens.
didn't know you. I don't remember you seeing that. Okay.
Yeah. So you grew up on a farm, and then it was drilled in to go to college.
Yep,
So then
yep.
you're a technologist. So when did you know this kind of in high school? Did you kind of catch on to technology, or was it later?
Early on, I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. We only had one TV channel, and Jacques Cousteau would come on it, so that looked like fun.
Yeah.
By the time I got to college, I wanted to be a chemist. So I did a year of chemistry and decided that I really, really don't like chemistry lab. So I switched to computer science.
Cool. Was there like an explosion? Did you lose some eyebrows on a Bunsen burner or anything? Or
I actually had 2 vials in my hand, and one was 100% pure acetic acid, and one was something else. So to figure out which was which, I sniffed. So I sniffed in sort of a full breath of pure acetic acid and couldn't breathe for a little bit, and decided that no, this lab thing is just really not for me.
yeah, it doesn't really happen when we're dealing with computers.
No.
A lot safer than that.
A lot safer on the computer. Yep.
Yeah. So that was South Carolina. Did you, why didn't you stay in North Carolina?
My father moved to Myrtle Beach, basically, Conway, Myrtle Beach, when I was in the 8th grade to take a job at Grove Manufacturing, which made cranes. That had moved from up north down to South Carolina to get away from the unions.
Interesting. So that was the in-state school at that point for you. Yeah.
Yep.
And then.
And what's your story? How did you end up at USC?
I'm from Aiken.
Okay. All right.
So, and my parents went to USC.
All right.
Yeah. When I grew up, I'm not a huge sports person. So I didn't really
me
know
either.
there was schools outside of like the 2 that were in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know there was anything but but 2 schools. I thought there was just and I always thought you just went to the school near you. So I didn't really understand how that worked.
Sorry.
But yeah. So there's one and done. I just applied to South Carolina and got in.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't come up on a farm. My dad was a programmer. So you were hanging out on the farm. I was hanging out on the vacs.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to South Carolina and you graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And then what year was that? I know it's a long time ago.
Okay, a long time ago. So I didn't finish high school. I didn't do 12th grade. So I went straight to college from 11th grade. So I did that in 79. So I did 3 years at USC. So it was 82.
82, yes.
So 82, I came to NC State for 1 year of grad school, which makes it 83. And then I started working.
Yeah. And then why'd you go to grad school?
The go to college instruction from my childhood was really go to college and get your PhD. So got the master's degree and then went, no, there's no real advantage of back then, particularly PhD in computer science. So
Yeah.
I went to work.
Yeah. And back then, comp sci was in the math department too, right? So the math would always get harder too, which was no fun. Yeah. Now they put in engineering and the math gets hard, but it can tail off.
Right.
Like when you and I went through, there was if you went comp sci, you were signing up for a ton of math.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then when you went to NC State, when I did, the master's program was actually part of the electrical engineering department.
Oh, weird.
So
undergrad was in a different department than the grad?
Yeah, it's something to do with the NC State
That's
split
right.
of computer science and engineering. So I had to take these electric circuits classes that I never did actually pass. Like,
So we're not really sure if you got your master's or not.
we don't know.
We'll have to contact the chancellor and
Yeah,
get some
find out about
get
that,
our research staff looking at this.
Yeah.
Back then in computer science, for folks that now, so probably Fortran, PLC. Okay, wow, yeah,
Fortran.
yeah.
360 assembler.
This was not cards, but it was magnetic tape.
Cards.
Wow.
I did cards.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So explain for people like how cards worked.
Well, you got looks like a typewriter, right?
Yep.
And you type on it and it makes little holes in the cards.
Yeah. So you're gonna do a program and it's got like 80 steps,
Right.
and you could probably have to break that down into like
one instruction
more
per
cards.
card, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This predates me, but my dad did cards, and so then you had to there was these boxes, and you would put them in, and instruction number 1's at the front, all the way to the back, and then you put them in this thing, and the program pulls them in just like almost like scanning in a printer today, and then you do all that, and it like flashes an error signal,
Yes.
and it's like bug. That's all it tells you.
That was it.
So
So
now
then
you
you had to create other cards that would say things like, well, print.
yeah,
And it sorted at different points in the card deck to figure out what went wrong.
yeah. So my dad would have boxes, and they'd have rubber bands around them.
Yeah.
And like this was a debug for this. This was this. This was set up a machine for this. So these were like his macros, but they were like very physical.
Yep.
It's like something kind of almost romantic to me.
And, until you drop them.
and then,
And then you got to sort the cards.
yeah, there's like a hole. You would have to put a little pencil on there, like 1 of 80, and like in case you would learn all these little tricks. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you did that, you graduated, and then where did you find a job?
So at the time in the Triangle area then, we had IBM, and we had Data General and a few other big companies. And I don't know, did you read The Soul of a New Machine, Tracy Kidder's
Yeah.
book? Okay. So, that was about Data General and basically trying to build a VAX killer. You mentioned VAXes.
Yep.
And they had two different programs for it, one up north and the one down here in Research Triangle Park, where they were trying to build the radically new machine.
Yeah.
In the end, the one up north won, and they sort of shut down everything that was happening on this radically new machine. They laid off a lot of people. And people that get recruited to the Triangle tend to not want to leave. So rather than go back to Boston, where most of those people are from, they started a whole bunch of startups, and one of those was called Foundation Computer Systems. And I went to work for, as a programmer for Foundation Computer Systems. And we were building what would now be called a low-code, no-code system, but back then we called it a 4GL. And it, you'd write the code once, and it would work on, different monitors, not monitors as in green screen, yes, CRTs, and different databases, and different all kind of things. So it's the exact same idea of what we got now in low code, no code, but on a CRT.
Yeah. The keyboards were better back then.
They
had like
more
a real
tactile
physicality.
feel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like ting, 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 ting. They were super loud though. You
no
walk in those
carpal
rooms,
tunnel from moving a mouse around too much.
Yeah, and all those computers had to be cooled, so you'd be in these rooms that had an elevated floor, and so there's air conditioning running underneath you and above you. So you would always have to go in like with winter wear because it was freezing in these places.
Yep.
The good old days. And then I remember my favorite thing as a kid was helping there would be a problem or we'd need to run a wire, and you'd have to have these suction cups. You could pull up panels in the floor. That was always fun. And as a kid, I could like get underneath there. That was fun.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Felt like being in Aliens or something. Was SAS kind of, they had
SAS
started
was around.
then?
SAS was maybe 1 or 2 buildings.
Yeah. Did you ever interview there or didn't really?
I interviewed there on my way coming to grad school and didn't get an offer. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I interviewed there like 6 times, never got an offer.
Never got an offer. Okay. Yeah, what do they know?
I don't know what I did wrong.
Yeah, me either.
Okay, so then you're working for the man for a while, and then what was that like? Was it interesting? Was there?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. Was there an entrepreneur? Was this an entrepreneurial kind of a thing? Or
Yeah.
was it bigger?
So they were the founders of Foundation were all people that had worked for Data General, and they were building this new system to code it once and run it everywhere kind of thing. and were reasonably successful. They had licensed it to Oracle. They had licensed it to, I think, to Digital, and Burroughs, maybe some other big companies.
Yeah, Hitachi was big around then, kind of like in that zone, trying to build those kind of things.
So they had several licensees of it. It was a commercially successful product.
Yeah.
But like I said, one of the licensees was Oracle, and the company got bought.
By Oracle?
No, it got bought by another company that was called Encore, and Encore was one of the very first, sort of concept IPOs. It was one of the founders of, it was Ken Fisher, who was at Prime, one of the founders of Data General, and one of the founders of Digital. And they all got together to, create this new company that was going to be brilliant at sales and marketing, because they were brilliant at sales and marketing personally. And they were going to go, the business plan was to go and buy a lot of other smaller companies that had good technology but weren't good at sales and marketing, and grow it up and make it big.
Yeah.
In the end, it didn't work out. But anyway, Encore bought us as one of their software companies.
Kind of after that IPO, or like on their way to the IPO?
After their IPO.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact number. I think they raised like $50 million, which would have been a lot of money in 84-ish, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't call them IPOs back then.
No.
I remember they, one of the things that inspired me is my dad gave me a magazine that had Bill Gates, and it was the Microsoft thing, and they called it like, Bill Gates' deal that made him, a millionaire, and they didn't really call it an IPO. They're like, it wasn't even really in the vernacular at that point. It's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, the contract that Oracle had with Foundation, the company I was working for, somehow gave them a right to break the contract on a change of control. So they exercised that. I think they had to write a check and essentially get a source code license. Then they owned source code; they could go in their own direction. And I actually got called up by Larry Ellison and recruited to come work for Oracle. So I flew out. I started the company with George Woltman, who was the key developer at Foundation, and I had become sort of the number two one. So we flew out to California. We interviewed, and we decided that, the real estate is just too expensive. We're never going to convince our wives.
What was a North Carolina farm boy like meeting Larry Ellison?
He's impressive.
Yeah.
I think he's still pretty impressive. One of the really funny things is when I did go to work for him, I was 24. And when I got to the rental car agency and they discovered I was 24, they wouldn't rent me a car. So I had to call Larry. And he had to send one of his secretaries to co-sign for renting the car.
Wow. Yeah. There's a whole thing in Silicon Valley that what's the difference between Larry Ellison and God? God doesn't think he's Larry Ellison. Yeah, it's kind of a classic Silicon Valley zone with him.
Yeah,
he's got a bit of an ego, apparently.
But it was a spectacular time. So
we get some Oracle stock.
Well, so that's what I was.
And have you held on to it?
Well, no. Okay, so there's a story there. So we were offered Oracle stock, and both of us looked at it and went, "We can't afford on salary. We can't afford to buy a house here, anything comparable to what we have in the Triangle." So I had just finished building like a 3,000 square foot house on an acre of land. I think it was $180,000 that I had into it.
Yep.
So when we got the job offer from Oracle, we both went, we can't, we're not going to be able to afford anything to live in. So he actually said, well, then we'll buy you a house.
Whoa. Okay.
So
nice.
then we went house shopping. And I picked out a nice little, sort of 3,000 square foot in Palo Alto Hills on maybe a half acre. And it was $1.2 million. And George had picked out something else. I think it was a little bit less. So when we went back in to Larry and said, okay, we found our houses. And he's like, oh, okay, fine. Well, to be fair, I should get your house in North Carolina. Yeah, that's fair. Well, what's it worth? Well, it's probably worth $200,000. I paid $180,000 for it.
Yeah.
You expect me to up you by $1 million? I'm like, well, you made the offer, not us. Because he had no idea that property was that much cheaper in North Carolina. So it didn't happen. But we became consultants instead, contractors. We started our own company, and that's how that first company got started. It's us being contractors.
I'd never heard that story. Yeah. Have you ever done the math of what that Oracle stock would be worth now?
I did at the time that we sold that company, and it was almost exactly the same.
Well, that's good. All right. Yeah. So then you started Data Direct, right?
Well, right. So that company was called, the initial name was Pioneer Software Systems. And There are at least 100 different companies in the Triangle named Pioneer, including people that did Windows and other kind of stuff. So we changed it to the name of the product that we first built, which was Q plus E. And that came about because we were doing this work for Oracle, working on this 4GL system. And sort of the word got out that we knew a lot about Oracle. And if you go back to that time, Motorola was producing the 68,000 chip, and everybody and their brother was building a new Unix box based on the Motorola 68K chip. And most of those companies needed to sell to the government. And to sell to the government back then, and probably now, you had to have Oracle. Well, you could buy a license from Oracle to get Oracle onto your box, but you had to pay Oracle to then port it onto your box, and they were so much demand that they were way backed up on porting. So I got a call one day out of the blue from, I can't remember, I think it was Acer, but I may be wrong, I don't remember. But one of the Japanese companies. Hey, we've just, paid all this money to Oracle for this license, but they say they can't port it for a year. Can you guys do it? I'm like, well, how much is the porting fee? Well, Oracle wants $1 million, but we think you guys could probably be a little bit less. Like, oh yeah, we could do it for $750. Okay, great, done. So then I walk into the room with my partners and go, guys, I just agreed to port Oracle source code to a
Did you
Japanese,
have access to Oracle source code through the relationship or something? Or
no? Well, the
Acer had okay, so they're just gonna they could let you mess. Yeah. Okay, got it.
We were working on Oracle source code through our contracting with Oracle,
so it wasn't totally unfamiliar.
Well, it pretty much was. We were building tools, and we didn't know anything about the core system. But so I walked in and said, "Hey, I just agreed to port Oracle to the 68K box for $750,000." And everybody sort of looked around and went, "Richard, we don't know anything about." Yeah. Well, I figure for $750,000, we'll figure it out. Yeah, and we did.
And to put that in perspective, well, the company was making what, like 100K at this point, so this was like a big number.
It was a big number. Yeah. Yep.
It's a big number today, like for a deal, but like back then it was like
beauty of it was
10 million today.
I think it probably took us 4 months to do it. But once we had done it, it only took 2 or 3 days to do it the second time.
Yeah, there's like this part of code that's the hard part. And,
Well, and again, all these boxes were the same because they were using the same version of Unix, and they were using the same 68K Motorola chip. So yeah, once you figured out how to do it, it's sort of like putting together a piece of furniture from
the second
from
time
IKEA.
Infinitely
second time is way quicker than the first time. So I think we ended up with a total of 5 companies paying us to port Oracle over. So by that point, we were making pretty good money.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were doing at Oracle was helping with building the tools out for a new operating system at the time known as Windows and its big buddy OS 2. So some graphical user environments on top of Oracle. And there were no tools in Windows comparable to all the tools we had in the Unix world for doing queries and report writing or building forms or any kind of stuff. So we had a brilliant idea of, well, let's do it. So we built basically this little report writer thing that worked on top of Oracle. And since we had a background in writing code that worked on top of all the databases, we made it so that it would work on Oracle, on Sybase, and all the other SQL databases, including the flat file databases like DBase or RBase or whatever all the bases were at the time. We packaged that up. We were the very first Microsoft Windows application that could talk to a SQL database.
Very cool.
So where it got cool was we charged $99 for that. So we went to Comdex, our first time in Vegas, and we sold about 100 copies.
Wow.
Some number of those copies got bought by people at Microsoft.
Uh-oh.
So when we get back from Vegas, I get a phone call from a gentleman who claims to be Steve Ballmer.
Was he like very Steve Ballmer, like, wow, crazy over the top, or is that? It's probably a persona. Yeah,
he got there. And what he wanted to do was he had a problem. So, the only real viable Windows application at the time was Excel. And to put it in context, they were selling about 10,000 copies of Excel a month, and Lotus was selling hundreds of thousands of copies of 123. Right? So Microsoft had recently bought a license to Sybase, so they had their own SQL database now, Microsoft SQL Server. Right?
Yep.
Well, Lotus 123 could access SQL Server data. Excel could not.
Embarrassing.
Embarrassing.
Can't access your own database.
So they called us. Again, we're the only Windows app that can talk to a SQL database. Offered us $1 million to buy it. At this point, we got all this money coming in from porting Oracle. We're like, $1 million is nice, but it doesn't really change the math very much. And we had been doing work with Oracle long enough to know that the work that we were getting paid for every dollar that they paid us to do the work, they were probably making $1,000 of selling, the software.
Yeah.
So, we're, again, mid-20s, right? And decide that, well, no, we don't want to sell this. We're gonna build a software business. We're gonna grow this. So we turned down the $1 million from Microsoft, and instead suggested that they pay us a royalty per copy and give us access to mail, not email, because it didn't exist, mail, the registered Excel user list 3 times a year. I actually ended up in a conversation where I got compared to Opie and Andy because you Southerners ain't very bright. If you'll turn down $1 million to get $1 a copy on something that you're only going to be getting for 6 months, because after 6 months we're going to replace you with something else. Like, well, okay, all right, maybe. Yeah. But we had that right to mail so we figured we'd build other products and we would mail it and we'd build a software company that way.
Yeah.
And it's exactly how it turned out. The only part of it that didn't turn out the way it was predicted was, instead of going 6 months, it went about 4 years. And by the end, they were shipping about 400,000 copies of Excel a month. So every month a check showed up from Microsoft for $400,000. And I've never been able to repeat that.
Yeah. But that was a good bet. Yeah.
That was the bet. Yeah.
You've mentored me a lot, and you do this really, I kind of coined it, you do this hillbilly negotiation. So you'll roll into all these meetings and you'll just like lean into the hillbilly thing, and they just think they're totally taking advantage of you, but who's that Brer Rabbit that kind of so you Brer Rabbit them and you're like, well, shucks, I guess you could throw me in that briar patch. Yeah, I'm the dumb one here. Pay me this small royalty of, $1 per Excel. It's probably a dumb thing to do, but that's,
Well, that was their logic.
Yeah, we're
$10,000 a month for 6 months, $60,000, and you're turning down $1 million. You're just stupid, right? Now we were pretty sure they wouldn't get it done in 6 months because at most, if you got a list of 100 problems and you solve one of them, you still got the other 99, and you're not going to resolve the one you already solved.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right. Well, by the time they were paying us a few $100,000 a month, it was broke.
Yeah. They're like,
So
yeah.
So then they fixed it, but along the way, it was a good ride.
Yeah.
And we actually sold the company just a couple months before Microsoft ended the contract. So
good. Good timing on that one.
Timing. Yeah. Well, I've had others with bad timing, so it comes and goes.
Yeah.
But that one was good timing.
Yeah. So did you take venture capital back then?
We tried. We
seemed
asked
like
everybody.
bootstrapped. Yeah.
Nobody would give us money.
Yeah. This is back in the day. We had Aurora, InterSouth, and Southeast Interactive back then. This may predate that.
In the early days, all we had was InterSouth.
InterSouth.
And we did ask, but we didn't get any money.
Yeah.
Now, by the end of it, because we sold it in '94, everybody wanted to give us money because we were so profitable.
You're making like $5 or $6 million, almost pure margin. Yep. Yeah.
But then that rolled into the second one. So by then we had all these VCs who wanted to give us money. So we started another company, and they lined up, and I think we raised a couple $1 million in the first 24 hours.
Yeah,
it got a lot easier. And all from a who's who of Silicon Valley folks.
Yeah. Before we go there, so back in those days, so you knew Dr. Miller. Did you meet him when you were at NC State, or you met him kind of later?
Later.
Yeah. And then, so kind of in the entrepreneurial circle back then, there wasn't much going on in Durham. Durham was like almost
really
nothing.
The only other company that sort of preceded us in getting any kind of exposure was Da Vinci.
Yeah,
email
Chris Evans. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bill Nussey.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think they were least to my recollection, they were the first that got kind of known. And I think.
Now, did y'all hang out together and have entrepreneurial meetups in the Triangle, where it was like you, Chris, and Bill?
We would hang out together on airplanes flying back and forth to California.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
there was a lot of hey, Chris, hey Bill.
Did they ever was there any collaboration using like you could have promoted DaVinci to Excel users?
No, never commercially. There was always, we were
just
friendly.
knew each other. Yeah,
still are.
Yeah. Mailing the Excel list. Did you guys ever come up with anything to make that monetized?
Right. So we, the work that we did became the ODBC standards. Mm-hmm. Our next product was selling these ODBC drivers, so that we actually ended up with almost every major software company being our customers.
Yeah. Because everyone would get these different databases, right?
Lotus licensed the ODBC drivers.
That's funny. So everyone would get these databases, but mere mortals that didn't know SQL, they couldn't really interact with it. So they would use a front end, which was usually a spreadsheet of some kind, and they would need the middleware. And you guys were kind of like that middleware to connect to.
We were the database middleware.
Yeah.
But then sort of the next thing we built that had some of the highest volume was they rolled out Visual Basic. Mm-hmm. Microsoft rolled out Visual Basic, and it would only talk to flat files. Yeah. It wouldn't talk to SQL databases either. Well, here we are. So, about the same time they rolled out Visual Basic, a couple of weeks later, we rolled out, SQL for Visual Basic.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what we called the product. And, sold tens of thousands of copies because VB was a big seller. Anything at that point coming from Microsoft was a big seller. So we ran ads that said, you got VB, you want SQL. And, and interestingly enough, we got another call from Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Same story.
Yeah, they wanted to license it.
They wanted to license it. And we're like, well, guys, why would we do that for the little bit of money that you're offering us? And so that deal didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Yeah. That's okay because customers still needed it. I'm sure they built their own, but it's probably not very good.
Well, it became what was, I can't remember the name of the product. I'm too old to remember names.
Yeah.
But Access.
Access. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Did you ever meet Bill Gates?
I met Bill several times. Mm-hmm. Not in the course of doing any of those deals. I never dealt with Bill for the work that we were doing for Microsoft. I'd meet him at industry shows.
Yeah, like Condex and stuff.
Yeah, and they were like Esther Dyson conferences. There were these
confabs.
Yeah, where you get to go spend some time in Phoenix at a fancy resort, and there would be. I remember having the thought once that if somebody showed up with a machine gun at this event where there's 200 of there's the Gates, there's Michael Dell,
Jobs,
everybody's there. I'm like, one guy with a machine gun, they're going to take out the entire tech industry.
Yeah,
fortunately, it never happened.
Did you ever have? Did you interact with the Apple side, or they weren't really interested in kind of B2B type stuff? They were more consumer.
And back then, might still be the case. Back then, developing from the Mac was hard.
Yeah.
So we had Mac versions of our products, but they were 1% of sales. But it was at somebody like Ford Motor Company, they want 10,000 copies, and they want 100 of them to be for the Mac. And if you don't give them the 100 Mac, they're not going to buy the thousands of Windows.
So you have this kind of like half-ass Mac version that kind of someone has to complain about it not working for you to kind of like try to get it solved.
And we had the OS 2 versions.
Yeah. Yeah. Back then, software had a physicality too. So like whenever someone would order your software, you would send it out on a floppy. You probably initially sent it out on 8-inch floppies. Or
the
small floppies?
Smaller floppies. Yeah.
Smaller floppies. 3.5.
But by the end, it was those little 3.5-inch
3.5,
hard ones. There were 29, 30 floppies in the.
My first product had 30 floppies to install.
Yeah.
It was like punch cards because you're like feeding the thing. Yeah.
And ridiculous. If one of them if one of the 30 was bad, then you had to.
All things
start over.
Yeah. You have to ship them a whole nother thing.
Uh-huh.
So then there's an urban legend that deal, that Excel deal is like still taught at Microsoft. Is this true or false, or have you?
It is what I have been told.
Okay.
As an example to their lawyers of what not to do.
Yeah. And product managers. So there's like a way we don't do business at, and it's got a picture of you. It's like, this guy looks like a hillbilly, but he's dangerous. Stay away from this guy.
It's just funny about how long ago it was. That's almost 40 years, right?
Yeah. Don't ever have a recurring payment in anything at Microsoft. So then you started HAHT Software.
Yes.
Is that the company?
Yep. So that was the company we started after.
And so I know this, but it's not well known. But HAHT is the initials of the founders.
Yep.
And you're obviously one of the H's. And who are the other three?
Holcomb.
Yep.
All right.
Are you the first H or the second H?
We used to argue about that. The second H was Jim Adair, spelled Hebert. And then Tyler Bennett, he was the T. And Roland Archer, he was the A.
Got it. And then the urban legend here, is it Roland or Jim? They were a huge fan of the Allman Brothers.
Oh, it's Roland.
And they had the biggest, one of the biggest sites on the internet at the time, which was an Allman Brothers
fan site.
Homage fan site. And updating that site was such a pain in the butt that he wanted to have like some way of automating it. And that was like one of the
ideas behind behind HAHT site.
Right? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So let's see. Let's put this in context. This was 96.
Yes.
Yeah. And the way in hindsight, you guys were like way ahead. This was like what we'd call Notion today. You guys were trying to build this like super WYSIWYG internet flexible thing.
Well, we were trying to build, so early days of the internet, or the web anyway, the only real useful application on the web that did anything with data was the FedEx app. You could type in your tracking code and it would tell you where your package was. Everything else was sort of brochureware, just marketingware.
Yeah, very static.
And the web's inherently stateless, so we had to invent a way of keeping up with transactional data as you move through something. So we built one of the very first application development platforms, development environments for building database-oriented apps on the web. And we got lucky again. We demoed that to some folks out in California at the SAP California lab. And the person we demoed it to went, wow. One of the founders is in the building right now. He's going to love this. So we went from meeting with a product manager to meeting with Hasso Plattner, one of the founders of SAP.
Mm-hmm. Is he the P in SAP?
Well,
is that an acronym too? I don't even know that.
They stand for something in German.
Okay. Plattner could be the P.
And within a month, we had a deal with SAP and we were demoing HAHT site, working on SAP data, and we actually contracted with SAP and we built all of their original web versions for SAP America. And we thought that we had struck gold again on that one because we thought, well, SAP is obviously going to buy us. And what we didn't understand was the politics of big software companies, maybe big companies in general.
Especially international, complicated, especially German.
So we had the blessing of one of the founders, but the deal was through SAP America. And folks in Germany weren't that thrilled with the idea of SAP America taking the lead on something. So we had that contract for 3-4 years because that's how long it took the folks in Germany to do what we had done in a month.
Yeah.
And then that deal went away.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What's cool though is you were doing all this stuff, very interactive websites, kind of almost before even Amazon was born. Just
oh yeah,
there was no AWS, there was no Amazon.
Yep.
And then I think you guys were really early on online payments. If there was like some piece of that you had done some really interesting things around.
We pioneered a lot of that. So I can't remember again all the names. There was a show each year where they rolled out the best hardware platform and the best software platform of the year. It's one of the PC Week or PC Magazine guys that ran it. We were in, the exact year would have been maybe 98, 99. Mm-hmm. We were the software product of the year. Guess what the hardware product was?
98, 99. This is like the cloud computer thingy?
The Palm Pilot.
The Palm. Yeah. Didn't make it.
Well, we both ended up
yes.
making it.
Yes. So tell us, obviously the .com bubble is going to burst in this story somewhere.
Yes.
But so tell us so you raised, how much did you guys raise? You had at the time, it was like this crazy round you guys started with, like for a seed round in the Triangle.
That seed round was a couple million.
Yeah. At the time, it was like, holy cow.
And then 3 months later, we raised another 10, 15 million.
Yeah.
I still have the sticky note where I scribbled that deal out at dinner for the VC who led the round. And
that was one of the West Coast. You guys pulled in some West Coast money too.
Menlo Ventures.
Yeah.
They were, pretty much all the money into HAHT was West Coast.
Yeah.
We raised over $100 million.
Wow.
Before it was said and done. And we're in registration to go public in March of 2000.
Uh-oh.
So much for good luck.
Well, what's a shame is you guys actually had revenue. Like you were solving real business problems.
We had
you
good
kind of
revenue.
rolled up in all this noise that was no revenue.
The shame is, right? Because by that point, by the time we were in registration in public, we hadn't raised quite that much money.
Yeah.
A few months before that, we had a buyout offer, and we turned it down because we wanted to go public. So rather than
who was it from? Can you say?
I think it was Business Objects. If it wasn't Business Objects, it was one of the other big analytics type companies.
Yeah.
And we were full of ourselves and arrogant and said, nah, that's not enough money.
We didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
No one did.
So we turned that down and we were going to do the big IPO, and we ended up selling that company for a lot less than we would have gotten had we taken the original offer.
Did you actually get to the point where you did the S1 and everything? Or
Yep. Yeah, we were in registration.
Oh, so you're in registration, then the bottom fell out.
Just collapsed.
And they're like, the bankers are like, you got to pull this and we're going to stop. And
Yep.
Yeah. Did you have to like raise emergency money at that point? Because you probably had planned that you have this windfall of money from the IPO.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you have to raise money is
the worst time.
Not the best terms.
Yeah. You and I don't know if it was you, but either you or the founders had bought the building you guys were in, and it was like kind of where North Hills is now. Is that right?
We didn't buy that building, but it was right where North Hills is.
Okay.
Where all that new developments, they tore that building down.
You said something like, we're going to make more money from this building than the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happens.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay. So then what did you do after, so that will kind of put your ego in check pretty quickly. What'd you do then?
Then we did StrikeIron. So that was with Bob Brower and David Motzinger. And it was, again, everything we did was always sort of focused on data. And the idea here was, well, now we got cloud computing coming. So we tried to build a system, again, of development tools that would help people, build applications in the cloud and work with these newfangled things called web services. And we would demo it to people and show it to people, and they would go, that's nice, that's kind of cute. But that demo you just did showed an example doing address verification. Where'd you get that from? Like, we just built it so we could demo it. And then and after being told enough, we finally dawned on us that nobody gave a damn about our tools, but they really, really liked the web services that we had built that did, address verification and would tell you the weather. And, and it was funny, one of the very first test cases was, because now e-commerce is coming along, right? And we had an address verification, service, and one of the first companies to license it was Fredericks of Hollywood.
Ooh, nice.
And they had a problem that, you're ordering something sexy and spicy for your girlfriend, and you make the mistake of typing in your home address, and it ends up going to your wife. Now you have to explain why these panties showed up not in her size. And you would, so people would call up and go, no, I never ordered that, and force a refund. And FedEx charged a lot of money if they had to redeliver the package or return it back. So we were charging like 10 cents a lookup kind of thing. So they would take the name and look up the address that we gave and say, I don't think Shirley Jones is at this address. Are you sure? And that was sort of the start of sort of mass adoption for us anyway of those different services. And I think in the end we had about 100 services.
There was another company in the Triangle that did this.
Oh, yeah.
but they would like dedupe your data in your database, which seems very simple. But like, we had this explosion of data, and suddenly and then part of that is they would look at the addresses and kind of say, yeah, those are the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, in Bob's company, Bob Brower, the co-founder of StrikeIron, he had done data flux.
Yeah, that's it. Data flux.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of all that was coming.
Yeah. This is funny. Together. I met them when they started Data Flux, and they're like, "You want to come by the office?" And I was like, "Sure." And I'm looking at the address. I'm like, "What?"
Yep.
And it's a house. And
house in
like,
Perry.
Yes, you go to this house in Preston somewhere. Not Preston proper, but like like one of the sub Prestons. And it's just like no furniture and monitors and cords everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, "Wow, this is intense."
A startup in a garage kind of thing.
They got done. I forgot he was involved in StrikeIron. So you started StrikeIron in 2003.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds right.
Yeah, and were you like founder, or you?
Yep.
You were kind
me and Bob, and there was an original founder, and then David.
Yeah.
Another original, and then David Monsinger.
Cool. Did you guys raise a bunch of capital, or you gotten kind of your?
We
your fill
raised, I think, like $500,000 from the Aurora funds, sort of on the idea, on the concept.
Yeah.
And then when we finally figured out what we were actually selling, not tools, but actual web services. We were able to raise a couple million more, and then we raised more money from VCs in Boston. And all in total, I think we raised about $18 million. But the last round was a down round. So, because we hadn't quite hit the numbers that we were supposed to.
Yeah.
And then we brought in a new CEO who had more of a sales background than a technology background. And he just did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Sean O'Leary came in and took the company and took all this code we had written, all this stuff we had done, and went, let's figure out who the actual customer is, and let's do real sales and marketing, and let's sell. I learned an important lesson then. Sales matters. Marketing matters. Positioning matters. And grew the company up to about $10 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And then we sold it in 2014.
Yeah. To Informatica. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. And then in the middle there, I remember you calling one day and saying, "Hey, I'm buying a farm."
Oh,
tell me about that. So you grew up on a farm.
I grew up on a farm.
Then you decided, you know what I really need
is a farm
to get back to a farm.
Yeah. Well, I had the 4 kids. Was divorced. Living in great big house in Country Club Hills in Raleigh, and just looked at the life my kids were living, and it wasn't as good a life as I had on the farm. Right? You couldn't really couldn't play in the street. There were too many cars. There were neighbor kids, but they each went to a different school, or they couldn't play because they had soccer practice or this or that or something else. There were days when, I needed myself and my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, and at least 2 or 3 other people, just to get my 4 kids to the different soccer games that they were supposed to be to.
Yeah.
So I bought this little farm in Hillsboro with the idea that, this will give us something to do on the weekend. All right. I'm tired of being in the city. So to put it in context, the farmhouse, which was built in 1870, was smaller than the master bedroom suite in the house that we were living in. Had a wood stove for heat, no air conditioning, plenty of holes though for air to come through, and we'd go on the weekends. And after somewhere between a month or 2 on Monday morning having to get up early and drive back to Raleigh for the kids to go to school, the kids just went, "So, Daddy, why don't we just stay here?" Because by that point they had horses and they had dirt bikes and 4-wheelers and 45 acres on a river to play on. And
you Trojan horsed them.
Yeah. So
you made it their decision.
They grew up on the farm, but then the problem is and you have it. You have the same disease. This entrepreneurial, I gotta do it. I can make this better. I can do something with it. So instead of it being the weekend place to hang out, it became, why don't we really farm? Why don't we get some sheep?
Yeah. Sheep.
And some chickens. Yeah. And that's all fun. Well, these 5 sheep were pretty good. Why don't we make that 50?
Yeah.
And then why don't we do this? And so next thing I know,
once you have 50 sheep, you're going to end up with a lot of sheep.
You're going to end up with a lot of sheep.
Because they always have twins.
Yeah.
So it happens fast. It's a logarithmic progression. You learn about compounding with sheep.
So that became, it went from let's hang out here on the weekend to let's try to build a real organic farm business. And that was a lot of physical labor and work. It was good for the kids, I think. But now the kids are grown, so
it's not so much fun when it's
now
you out there at 6 a.m. with a sheep that has some kind of a problem.
right. Yep. So 20 years. We did that for 20 years.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Did you officially sell the farm, or you're still looking?
I have officially sold all the farm businesses, so
Okay.
I'm not farming anymore.
Okay.
The farm property is for sale.
Oh, okay. If anyone's interested, hit Richard.
That's
up on
right.
LinkedIn.
Hit me up. Yeah.
If you need a little farm.
It's on the the
Not
market.
so little farm. How big is it? Like 20 acres?
It's 45 acres.
45 acres. Wow. And then you did this really interesting thing where you vertically integrated, right? So then you thought, all right, I need workers. So then you found a town where people wanted to learn how to organic farm. You brought them here, and then you're like, well, what do I do with this stuff? And then you bought a restaurant.
Yep.
So so literal farm to table.
Yeah, it was a vertical integration, and my wife is a Moorhead scholar from UNC, and at that time, all right. So what are we talking now? Early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
2004, 5.
Yeah.
The coolest thing on earth was organic farming.
Mm-hmm.
There were little kids walking around with T-shirts that said, "When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut, a doctor, or an organic farmer," with a check mark on the organic farmer thing. So, one year we got, I think it was 4 Moorhead scholars as interns at the farm, and our average farm worker at the time, not so much a worker, but somebody who wanted to learn farming. They had a PhD in this, or a master's degree in something else, or they had turned down law school. They didn't take that job with Goldman because they just wanted to learn to farm. All right, so it was a lot of fun, because now here we are. These people are living on the farm, and we're feeding them, and we're all working together. But the conversation over dinner was just fascinating. Right, by this point, I'm getting close to, I guess, 40, and they're all in their 20s. But just I love being around people that are that smart and have that many ideas and are just so passionate about it. But those days are over.
Yeah.
All those people are now back on Wall Street, back in law school, or maybe working for Elon building rockets. I don't know. They do not want to be organic farmers.
Yeah.
That's hard work.
Seems romantic, but the juice may not be worth the squeeze on some of them.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Did you found any companies after that? So after StrikeIron, then you've been more or less like on boards and kind of supporting kind of role.
So those were the 3 companies I founded. I did the math, and I had been either an investor in or on the board of or an advisor to about 40 companies total in the almost 40 years I've been doing it. And some of those are I show up for a board meeting every 3 months and get a meal, and then some of those are
you also contribute. You always have
some
good
of those
ideas.
I'm like every day I'm on the phone with somebody trying to help work through a sales problem or this problem or that problem. So different levels of attention on that. But done a lot of other things, including things with you that were fantastic and wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you remember the snowstorm one winter when you called me about the offer you had gotten for Auction River?
Yeah. So a company wanted to potentially buy us. They wanted us to come out, but there was this crazy snowstorm.
Yes.
There's like feet of snow.
Feet of snow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you said,
Take the offer.
Get there. You said, go out there, figure out how to get there. I was like, crap, he's right. So Michael Jones at the time had a Jeep. So we took his Jeep and we went as far west as we could, and we got to an airport, and then we were able to get there. So yes, and we sold the company. So that was good advice. Yes.
And then you got it back.
Yeah. So then we bought it back as channel advisor. So yeah. Buy low, sell high. You
That's the way to do it.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't go public in the middle of a market crash.
No, that's not good.
You were able to miss that.
Got lucky on the channel advisor side.
Yep.
So you've seen the startup ecosystem here from the very early days to now. What are some of the things that you how do you think about it? Do you think of like phases or and also you were inspired me on this payback piece, and you've been on all these boards. You've started 3, but you've impacted way bigger. Where does that come from? Is that just like a Richard thing, or
the payback in general thing probably came from my mother. I mean, along with, she grew up in post-war London, right? So, she had stories of, once a year you could get shoes and you could trade stuff and maybe get some sugar. And so there, I guess, an environment at the time for her that was very, if you didn't help your neighbor and your neighbor didn't help you, you weren't likely to get through it.
Yeah.
So she instilled, I think, probably that lesson in me. And then it's the same with farming, right? There's some tasks that require 15, 20 people to do, and you don't have 15, 20 employees. So everybody gets together in the neighborhood and helps you
kind of an
build the barn.
Amish vibe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the give back thing was probably just instilled in me.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I love seeing people be successful, and I learn so much for it. So, so the changes in the area. One of the problems, and you know this, that you and I are two of the exceptions that were able to successfully raise very large sums of venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Most companies in this area couldn't when we were doing companies, and still can't.
Yeah.
There still is very little early stage or mid stage or even late stage venture capital in the Triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has an impact on the companies. They tend to be lean and mean and wiry, and then the other part of that is once you've gotten the company to a certain level of success, we don't have the infrastructure here or maybe the critical mass that makes it really easy to sell your company.
Right.
So so I did two things recently. I started a little small venture fund just a little bit before you started.
That's crazy. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, it is probably a little crazy. And I took on the role of the local, deal maker rep for an investment bank that sells software companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it because they reached out to me. All right.
Had you worked with them before? Or?
No.
Okay.
And never even heard of them before.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But they reached out to me, and I loved their story. It was great, and they they weren't representing that many companies in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And they, one of the reasons was that they didn't really have any Southerners working for the company. So, I met their profile, they met my profile, and I started doing some stuff with them, and that's gone extremely well.
Yeah, say a little bit more about that. What's the name of the firm and like?
The company they're based right outside of Seattle. It's called Quorum Group.
Mm-hmm.
They're the largest software technology sales side investment bank in the world. Sold over 500 deals. Do tons of training and educational events, and the real difference is that everybody at the company that whose job is to find companies and sell them to the M&A buyers. They're you and me. They're guys that started their own companies, funded their own companies, grew their companies, and sold their companies. They're not your typical investment bank has someone with an MBA from Wharton or Harvard or Stanford or really really smart, great guys, but they've never had to make payroll. Yeah, they've never had that.
Not really operators.
Wow, yeah. I just maxed out my credit cards in order to be able to buy that thing I needed to be able to launch the product.
Yeah,
and when you're talking to, particularly in the South, small entrepreneurs that have taken 10, 15 years and bootstrapped their company up to 3-4 million in revenue, you speak their language, and then it appeals more to them. They trust you.
Yeah. Now, what's the profile? So is this, you've got $1 million in revenue up to 10, or do you guys go like higher, lower? Like what's the sweet spot for firms you guys, the companies you work with?
Sweet spot is probably 3 to 20 million right now. But yeah, we do from 1 up to 100.
Yeah.
And the real sweet spot is companies that don't have a lot of venture money behind them, because the VCs all know somebody, right? They all got a buddy who, and the things tend to get traded off that way. Yeah. So they tend to be bootstrapped.
Yeah. Cool. There's a lot of those around, which is, so I've got the tweener list, and of the 300 tweeners, easily 100 are bootstrapped. They've never had any venture. Yeah. And there's nothing that it's interesting, like now that I have a small fund, it drives VCs crazy that they exist and won't take their money. Like there's a super count. Like the calls I get incoming are people that are like, they can see on LinkedIn this company is probably at like 10 million, and they're obsessed with trying to invest in that company because it won't take money. It's like this counterintuitive part of raising capital.
Well, there's so much competition now in the capital front. Maybe not so much on the venture side, but we see it in the PE world.
Yeah, the PE world's on fire right now.
There's a new PE, as far as I can tell, every day.
Yeah.
But they're all kind of doing the same thing. They want to invest in, vertically oriented SaaS companies that have
B2B SaaS, super vertical, 5 to 10 million, never raised money, and low valuation.
Yes.
But super profitable and growing fast.
Yep, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you too, huh? Okay.
Yeah. I'll let you know when I find one of those unicorns, or unicorns probably bad, but one of those mythical creatures running around.
Well, they're out there.
Yeah. Element 451 just had a big transaction. That was amazing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was exciting. And then there's, I'm aware of 3 or 4 kind of under process right now. There's like, it was relatively quiet since the go-go days of 01 and a little bit of 22. And then it's been quiet in 3. And then here at the tail end of 4, it's really picking up. Are you guys seeing that in your deal space?
So, so we don't disclose a deal when it's in the cluster, but
directionally.
But I got 4 or 5 companies in the market.
Yeah.
Locally-ish, local being sort of Atlanta to Richmond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
South Carolina, whatever, in between. So no, there's a lot of activity going on and a lot of sales. Really good improving valuations.
Yeah.
So keys are you need growth, you need low churn. Deals fall apart if no matter how fast you're growing, if you're losing half your customers each time. So some of the B2C deals are hard because churn's high and the Ps don't want to fund that. But it's interesting, the Ps are doing probably 60-70% of the deals now. The strategics aren't as big I sold all my companies to strategics. Yeah. But now it's almost all financial buyers.
Yeah, interesting. And then they spend a lot of time thinking about the rule of 40. Explain to people. You probably get tired of talking about this. Because I didn't really know about it until I started to brush up against this PE world. And it's an interesting thing. But
it kind of makes sense. So the rule of 40 is, if you add your EBITDA percentage to your growth rate, it needs to be at least 40. And so if you're growing 40% and break even, that's rule of 40. If you're 20% EBITDA and 20%
Ps don't really love that, though, because they're always going to go, they want to have some EBITDA. Yeah. So it's almost like a 10-30 is kind of like good. 2020 is awesome.
Unless you're, if your growth is high enough. If you're growing at 100% and no EBITDA, then they'll look at that and go, oh, okay.
Or 100 and minus 60, they're like,
they don't want to. Well, because the way their model works, they put their money in, they don't want to put more money in.
Yeah.
So
a lot of times they get leverage off the EBITDA, so they're looking at that EBITDA as a way to pay off some debt of some kind as well. Yeah. So when a first time founder, like let's say one of your kids or a 25-year-old comes up to you and says, Mr. Holcomb, thinking of starting a business. What is you've got 40 years of knowledge on this. What's your advice? Well,
things go in waves, right? So there was a really good time to probably get into manufacturing cars back in the 20s. And then there was probably a really good time to get into aviation. All right. Well, 20, 30, 40 years later, those are mature industries and it's not probably a good time to get into them. And you might disagree, but I kind of think that's where we are now with software.
That's why I did Spiffy. Like it's almost impossible to have a moat in software, because if you get to 3 or 5 million, you're gonna have 100 competitors. And they're gonna be half the price of you. So then it basically is a sales and marketing company. So you basically have to just build something, get it to a little bit of scale, and then just pour. And that's what Todd at Pindo's done, which is he recognizes the game.
Sure.
Which that is the game right now.
Yep. Yeah. But I wouldn't recommend becoming a programmer.
Yeah. Let's look forward a little bit. What do you think about AI? Are you?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You turned me on to Perplexity.
Yeah.
It's
like having an assistant work for you.
It really is. Yeah. And it comes up with answers that I just can't find on Google. Even after it's told me the answer, I go, what's the source of that? And I'll go Google for something. I can't find it. It's really incredible.
Yeah, the Google index has gotten basically totally corrupt or like I don't know.
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, I have, as you suggested, I have
Everyone's
switched different places.
SEO'd so much that Google's useless. It's like
right.
they've lost the arms race.
You got three pages of sponsored before you actually get to something that was part of the organic search.
Yeah,
so.
even then the organic stuff it pulls up is like super not relevant.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've been pretty impressed with Perplexity.
Yeah.
But I think, when go back, say maybe when StrikeIron, for example, we had millions of dollars, like actual dollars, of hardware for load balancing and the servers and now you don't need any of that. You just
Yeah, we raised $90 million at ChannelAdvisor. Half of that was spent on servers.
Yeah. And now it's
crazy.
Send Amazon $29 a month to get started.
We probably could have done it for like $4 million on AWS or something. I did that math one time.
Yeah. Okay. And even quicker now, you would have.
Yeah. We don't need all the sales reps because now there's AI augmentation for those.
We don't need all the developers.
The engineers would be more efficient. Yeah. It's crazy.
We're seeing that trend that,
then people should buy farms is your recommendation. And call you if they want one. Wait a minute.
I'm thinking life science, material science. They're still doing some amazing things at NC State and especially material science.
Yeah. So the thing that's probably most immune from AI is these physical types of. Yeah.
But not farming, not restaurants.
Yeah, restaurants have claimed many an entrepreneur took a run at them and got whacked.
Yep.
Why are restaurants hard? Like, what's now you've been in? You've had like up to 2 or 3 at some point.
I think they're hard. The reason a whole lot of businesses are hard is people.
Yeah.
I mean, the more people you need, the more opportunity you have for conflict. And now people are your most expensive thing. Everything else is cheap. You can get cheap furniture. You can get cheap computers. You can get cheap everything.
Lettuce. Yeah.
The only thing that's not cheap anymore is the people. And people don't want to pay a lot for anything. So, I got really expensive people. I need a lot of them, and nobody wants to pay that much. So it's hard to get around in a restaurant.
Yeah, it's an economic squeeze on both sides.
You need those cooks. You need the servers. So you can make money at volume.
Yeah.
Same with farming. You can make money at volume. Whereas with software, you just make money with people typing their credit card number into a website, and there you go.
Yeah.
Ka-ching.
Yeah. There's no incremental variable cost for selling more.
Right. All right.
Well, cool. Anything else you would want to impart on our listeners and viewers? They're largely kind of local founder type people.
There's going to be a harvesting phase, I think, for the next few years, not just in the Triangle, but just overall. Because, just like airlines and cars, right? You can't have hundreds.
Yep.
It's not efficient. You got to consolidate that down into a few. So that whole M&A process of taking all the $2, $3, $4, $5 million companies and turning them into big companies or going away is going to happen.
Yeah, the P's seem to be kind of starting that cycle right now. Like
P's are
they buy these companies as a platform, which is an indication they want to like glom on a lot of other stuff.
And then they add a lot of stuff onto it.
Yeah.
And they've moved away from sort of smashing them all together and making everybody mad. They tend to keep them independent now until they've reached that point where, if we smashed them all together right now, then we would have a $100 million company and we could sell that to somebody else or take it public. But at that point, it's a friendly smash together.
Yeah.
Because you've got 20 portfolio companies and you're, all right, we need one of you to be the CEO of the combined company and you want to quit and y'all want to leave and cash out and, rather than buying a bunch of things and then forcing them together, which was more the trend 10, 15
Seems smart
years
to let them percolate and kind of figure out who the winner is in this kind of portfolio, small portfolio of things.
Yeah.
And then on the investing side, tell us a little bit about your fund.
So the fund, we, the bad timing thing, the initial close of the fund was like March of 2020.
2020, yeah.
Yeah.
It's COVID, yeah. You ran into COVID, yeah.
So we didn't close.
Yeah.
Because COVID came and the world was coming to an end. And then a year later, a lot of the people that had committed to the fund sort of called up and said, well, looks like the world didn't die. And we've still got this money set aside to invest in your fund. Do you want it?
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah. But instead of a $10 million fund, we raised $1 million fund. So, we write $100,000 checks into companies that, have product market fit and mainly need the money to, do that first bit of more advanced sales and marketing, and ones that probably are going to get home on that money. So several of the deals we were the first 100,000 in, and we helped them get up to the $500,000 to $1 million total round. And then in other deals, they got 900 and they just need that last 100,000 to close the round out. So we've done both ends. I'm just real wary of deals that, here's some money now, and next year you're going to need to raise some more. Maybe you can, maybe you can't.
Yeah, we have that at the Tweener Fund. Like we can't carry the water if we're like a big part of a first thing, or we can't. Right. Yeah. So
well, it's because the later rounds they want you to participate.
Yeah.
Pro rata, and the number gets bigger and bigger, and you don't have it. Right?
Yeah. And that's called the North Carolina Venture Capital Fund.
The North Carolina Venture Capital Fund.
Right. And then, so do you know the website off the top of your head, or I guess
ncvcf.com.
ncvcf.com. Okay. Cool. We'll put that in the show notes. And then we just launched a hub, and I need to make sure that made it in there. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if people want to reach out to you and they want you to write them a $100K check, just go on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
you're usually
that, or Richard at ncvcf.com.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But where I spend way more time is on the people that have gotten themselves up to $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, and are either at the age that they need to retire or at the point where they want to go do something else.
Looking for some liquidity of some kind. It's on the quorum side.
And the interesting thing on the M&A front is, if you look at the cycles, it's really a stock market cycle, right? It's about an 8-year cycle. So we had a crash in 2000, and then we got back, and then we had a crash in 2008. And
Bad one.
Back, and now it's almost 2025, and it hadn't crashed since 2008. So we're 14, 15 years into what is normally an 8-year cycle.
Yeah.
So sort of like, I can't predict when the market will turn, and you won't be able to sell your company at all.
Yeah.
But I can predict that the day will come.
Yeah. There's also an option where I find a lot of, we had this guy Dushan on who had Device Magic, and he did a small majority. So something like, people will sell somewhere north of 50%, get some money off the table, but then stay on and kind of get a double exit. Is that, can your firm help with those types of things?
Yeah. That's probably at least 50% of our deals. We call them recaps.
Yeah.
Or recapitalizations. So you take some money off the table. It really depends on what the founder wants. You know,
and you're on the buy side. So just like equivalent to a house, you're representing the founder.
Yeah, well, so I'm on the sell side.
Yeah. Oh, you're on the sell side.
We're selling to the Ps.
Yeah. Okay. So you're helping the founder.
I'm helping the founder. Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because not only do they get, a great investment banker, but you've got like 40 years, you've been like, get through the snow and go visit. Like you've got very good advice
dealing with them on, business operation issues or so one data point for the company, from the time that we first find you come to one of our educational events or something, to the time we sign you up as a client and take you to market is almost 3 years. There's a lot of work to get done between year one and year three on that. And it's simple things like, I talked to a company the other day that they were doing $20 million in revenue, right? And on the surface, it sounded like, wow, y'all are great, until we figure out, well, none of it's subscription. It's all one-off. I'm like, well, we can sell that, but it's not worth anywhere near as much as what a $20 million subscription.
Yeah. What are the top 4 things people could be doing that you find that they aren't? I run into the gap accounting thing. A lot of people don't understand.
They don't.
These bootstrap folks, they don't understand.
I have that
Rev Rec
argument
and stuff.
All the time. And it doesn't matter what you think. The answer is, if you don't do gap, you're not selling your company.
Yeah.
I've had some sad situations where, people, particularly engineers, they don't pay attention to the details, right? So I had one deal that almost completely fell apart because a stock transaction that had occurred 15 years ago, they didn't have a signed copy of the document. So we went back to the attorneys to get the signed copy of the document, to discover that the attorney was no longer with us. And that nobody knew where his records were. So this is a $30 million deal That's now not going to happen because of
piece of 15-year-old paper.
Yep. And fortunately, everybody on the 15-year-old piece of paper was still alive and all agreed to sign it.
Okay. Wow.
But
because sometimes you go back to the other party in this thing and they're like, I have leverage.
Yeah.
What's it worth
Right.
to you?
Yep.
Yeah. And then that can the whole thing can spiral out of control.
A big company's not going to do a deal if they can't, if there's something like that. So I run into that more often than you would think. Something.
Yes. I've
silly.
learned that as a developer, as a tech founder, we're not good at details, but it is, you got to dot those I's and cross those T's or it will just blow the whole thing up. Intellectual property. So if you ever have a contract or any of that stuff, you got to button that up. Be very careful with open source. Like people hate that if there's some way your code can leak into open source, that's a big thing that a lot of people fall into.
Yeah.
You got to document all the open source you use in some way and make sure that you
And I've had deals fall apart on tech due diligence, right? There's companies that do nothing but look at your source code and tell the buyer whether it's good or not. And if it comes back with 40 pages of what's wrong with it, which is a lot of times just you're using this version of something and it has a security threat that it was 3 years ago and you hadn't done anything about it in the last 3 years. So not only is your source code open to being penetrated, but you obviously aren't paying very good attention because you've let this go on for 3 years and then fixed it. Didn't find it yourself and didn't fix it. So
there could be a 3-year liability window where something's been going on. We don't have any way of proving it. Yeah. Interesting.
It's hard to sell companies that have had data breaches. All right.
Interesting.
You can, but it's a definite cut on valuation.
Yeah.
But this is the time of, I think, of consolidation of all these little small software companies. And the new ones I'm seeing, right? They're 2-3 people.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it a seed strap. So they'll go raise 1 million and then maybe 3 or 4. So they'll do a pre-seed and a seed and then they're kind of done. It's crazy. Yeah.
But they don't take I guess my companies, they all got up to well over 100 employees and yours was bigger than that. Now I'm running into companies with 3, 4, 5 million in revenue and 3 people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's
Why
really
are you
nice and
selling?
challenging. Yeah.
Just clip the coupons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for being generous with time. I know you just kind of came in from Europe and
Appreciate
we
it.
appreciate it. And it's good to see you. And
good to see you.
Thanks for, I heard a lot of stories, Richard stories I hadn't heard. So that's good.
I just have to remember them the next time I tell them so I keep them straight.
You got 40 years full of good stories.
Well, that's the good news. I've sort of reached that point in life where I could go, well, I'm getting old and I don't really remember that very well.
Yeah. Well, if you in 10 years, you can play this back. So this will help you as well. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
All right, Scott. Appreciate it, man.
For more Tweener content, check out the Triangle Tweener Time Substack at tweener.substack.com. For more Tweener content, check out tweenertimes.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon on Triangle Tweener Talks.